Hello and welcome to this week's episode of For the Love of Chiropractic. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about something that separates the good doctors and the good practices from the great doctors and practices. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about something that you can do that makes all the difference to your patients, takes very little of your own time, but yet sets you a cut above so that they know you really care about them. Welcome to Season 3 of For the Love of Chiropractic. Season 1 has 60 episodes of practice management tips to help you build the best practice possible. Season 2, 3 keys of my success, 50 interviews with the most successful chiropractors from around the world. Season 3, resources for your success. So let's listen up and learn how to build a great business. As I said in the introduction, on today's show, we'll be talking about how you can show your patients that you genuinely care about them. But before we dive into that, let's look at the world that we live in today. The world we live in today is increasingly technologically driven with gadgets and gizmos and obviously the internet, and is more and more and creates more and more separations between us, less interactions between people. But healthcare is the exception to that rule. Well, certain areas of healthcare. It is very possible and not surprising that when a person goes to consume healthcare with some specialties, they may not be touched by the provider at all. But chiropractic is very different because by definition, our area of healthcare requires a connection with the patient. Absolutely physically, but I think emotionally and psychologically as well. And it's that physical connection along with the emotional one that creates great chiropractic practices. You can be a phenomenal technician, perform fantastic, perfect adjustments, but if it's mechanical, I think your outcomes are limited and your practice is limited. And on the other hand, if you're an amazingly, deeply personal person, really connecting with your patients, while it's important to still give a good adjustment, I think if you had to pick between those two, the doctor who can personally connect with his patients or her patients will have a better outcome than the cold mechanical doctor who just performs a mechanical adjustment. But on today's show, I'm not talking about the adjusting and what happens in the adjusting room. In fact, I'm not even going to spend much time talking about things that happen in the office with the patient. Instead, I want to talk about how you can show you care when the patient isn't in the office, doesn't come into the office because, frankly, they can't come into the office. Because let's face it, things happen in our patients' lives, good things and bad things, that prevent them from coming into the office or delay their care and treatment, which then impacts the outcomes that they have and how they think of your office because they're still having a problem or they're not in optimum health. So when someone can't come into the office because of good things going on in their house and in their life, a graduation, the birth of a grandchild or a child, these are all wonderful things. A quick phone call and congratulatory, even a penned note or maybe an email says a lot about, hey, doc was thinking about me, and that's awesome. And that's important, but again, not where I want to focus our time today. Where I want to focus our time today is when things go wrong in our patients' lives. Are you more than just the chiropractor? Are you more than just the doc who removes the vertebral subluxations to improve their neurobiomechanical health? I think the great doctors are. I think they find a way to connect with their patients on an even deeper level that changes things, changes the relationship that the patient has, certainly with chiropractic, but with you and your office, and their feelings about you and your office. And in order to really talk about this, I want to drive the point home with a very personal example. As you listen to this, you may notice my voice doesn't quite have the rhythm and cadence and tone that it normally does. And the reason is, as I'm recording this today, I'm actually sitting at home with a case of COVID. And according to the current CDC guidelines, when a health provider has COVID, they should go into isolation for 7 days and then they can return to work. Okay, so I'm doing that when it comes to me and my patients. But I also have a life outside of that. I had 2 appointments that I needed to attend to with other healthcare providers. When I called those offices, the response was really interesting. One of the offices I called, they simply said, when I told them the problem, "No problem, just call us when you want to reschedule." That was it. End of conversation. Nothing personal, nothing hope you feel better. Oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that. Just call us when you want to reschedule. The other office was very, very different. The front desk person said, "Oh, Dr. Freeman, I'm so sorry to hear that." And then started to ask me some questions. When did it start? What symptoms do you have? How are you feeling? I really got the impression that she cared about my well-being. And while I'm still sitting at home sick, it made me feel good that she cared. There's someone in the outside world who cared. And to some of your patients, and I think most of them, that makes a huge difference when they're quote-unquote under the weather or something bad is going on in their life. So now to really start focusing in on this idea of caring, I want to break this down into an acronym for the word CARE. C-A-R-E. So the very first thing to do for the office and the doctor who cares is to pick up the phone and call the patient. Because just by calling them, you're showing you care. And I truly believe that if the doctor has a great relationship with the patient, that call should come from the doctor. So no, that's not the first call. Perhaps the patient called the office to say, "Hey, I have something or other, A, B, or C, so I won't be in." Not a problem. They do all the things that we talked about previously. What happened? When can we reschedule you, etc. But if the doctor then places a call, depending on the exact circumstances, perhaps it's a death in the family, perhaps there was a car accident, perhaps there's some other illness like a virus, the doctor can give a personal call and say, "Hey, I wanted to reach out to you personally and give you a call because I heard you're dealing with A, B, and C." And give the person an opportunity to interact with the doctor because, number one, it strengthens the relationship. And it shows the patient that you're not just in this transactionally for them. They come in and get an adjustment. They give you money. End of relationship. Thank you. Goodbye. No, it's personal. You have an opportunity to go through life with these people. Many of these people can choose to be lifetime patients if they know you care. If they know there's a really good reason that they should remain in relationship with you and your office for, dare I say, years? No, decades. For their entire life and their children and maybe their grandchildren. So as you're talking to this person on the phone, when you've called them, and they tell you what they're experiencing and what's on their mind and what they're feeling, there's also an opportunity for you then to answer questions that they may have and advise them because you're a doctor. You can advise them about things they can be doing at home to help themselves get better faster, or again, whatever it is they may be dealing with. And so many of these things, most people just don't know. I mean, sure, they should push fluids. Sure, they should relax. Maybe they should be taking an increased amount of vitamin D to help boost their immune system. But I want you to make a list, whether it's mentally or really on paper, of the things that you would recommend, you will recommend to people that they can do to help themselves when they can't get an adjustment, when they are stuck at home, so they can get better faster and be healthier sooner. And because you are a practicing doctor seeing lots of people, you're also in a position to talk about what's been going around. I've seen this with other patients. I've heard this from other people in the office that them or their spouse or their kids are dealing with A, B, and C. So you're not alone. And of course, it is going to get better. So once you've made the call and you've given them some good advice and answered some of their questions, you want to make sure that you're also a good resource for them and give them other resources that they can access. Remind them that it's important that they continue to eat properly. And in today's world, there's no shortage of services that will bring food to your house or even fresh groceries from the grocery store delivered to your house. And that's important that people aren't just scavenging and going, oh, well, I've got that one can of mushroom soup. I guess that's the one thing I'll eat. No, it's important that they're giving their body the resources it needs to get better, and you can remind them of that. Especially if the person lives alone or if they're younger or older. Because sadly, people who live alone on the younger side or elderly more often will neglect themselves than people in the middle of the bunch, in my experience. But now really put on your thinking cap. What other resources can you give them, remind them of, tell them about that maybe these are some of your tricks of the trade that you can help them with? And again, make it personal, because you know what? While the sickness is serious, they are going to be okay, and a little bit of humor goes a long way. Like, for example, I had a patient tell me years and years ago that his grandmother, who was an immigrant from Poland, when he was a small child and he or his siblings had a fever, the grandmother would take a raw potato and cut it in half and then bandage the raw potato to the bottoms of their feet, get them all snuggled into bed, and in the morning, he said, and the grandmother said, that magically the fever would be gone, and he said that it worked. And the potato would just be black because, as the grandmother taught, it sucked the poison out of the body. Now, I don't know about all that, but you know what? It's one of those old home remedies. Maybe there's something to it. Maybe there's not. But when you're on the phone with someone who's not feeling well, it'll at the very, very least put a smile on their face. And again, you can tell them, I don't recommend that, unless maybe you do. But you're creating the relationship, helping the person just by reaching out. They know you care. So we've talked about you calling the person, answering their questions / giving advice. We've talked about resources. So the final thing to talk about are expectations. What they can expect based on your experience with what they're dealing with. You can ask them what they think their expectations are based on what they're dealing with. And, of course, you can set an expectation of when they'll be able to get back into the office, back into the world, and integrating and living their life the way they really would prefer to be, not stuck at home on the couch in front of the TV. Also, you can set an expectation for them of whether or not you're going to give them a call again just to check in on them, see how they're doing. By the way, this doesn't have to be an illness. It could just be a severe weather situation that has certain of your patients stuck at home. I know here in Baltimore this year, we had a severe snowstorm that kept some of my elderly patients stuck at home for almost 3 solid weeks. Yeah, we were calling on them to check on them, make sure they had what they needed. They loved that we cared. And again, we reminded them of things like Uber Eats to bring them food, because their cars were snowed in their driveways and some of our elderly patients were not in a position to shovel it out. We even had one of our patients volunteer to go to another patient's house to shovel out her driveway because they had met in the office a younger man who's an EMS guy and an older lady who's a widow and lives alone. He was concerned about her. Do you have that kind of concern going on in your office and amongst your patients, with each other, for each other? That's a community of healthcare. And you can have that in your office if you care. Now, I said at the very beginning of this episode that this procedure that we've just gone through wouldn't take much of your time. And while I do think it means a whole lot coming from the doctor, there are times when a certain staff member has an even closer relationship with a certain patient than the doctor does. Maybe it's the floor CA, with one of the patients. Maybe it's the front desk CA. Maybe it's someone in the business office. Could be someone in any aspect of your practice. If you have a massage therapist, perhaps they've spent more time chatting with a specific patient, and so they really connect with them. While I think it's a great idea for the doctor to make a reach-out call, I think whoever has the best and closest relationship with the patient should also make that call. Because when you're sitting home sick alone, you really do appreciate knowing that the outside world cares. I know sometimes when we're sick and home alone, we just want to be left alone. But you know what? Even the voicemail makes you feel better because someone does care that you're in this world. And then, of course, when the person returns to the office, you can make a little bit of a big deal about it. Oh my God, it's so good to see you. So glad that you're back on top of the world, back doing all things you want to be doing. And I would almost guarantee that they thank you so much for stepping up and caring, sending them the message, the voicemail, the email, the text message, the personal phone call, because it really does matter. In many of the world's most popular religions, one of the highest forms of charity that you can do is visiting with the sick and helping them. And as doctors, we help the sick and less healthy all the time. Why not add to that by being the doctor on the phone that really steps up and makes a huge difference? Because I guarantee they're going to be telling other people that their doctor called them.
All right, and that's our show for today. If you have a question about today's show or your own practice, feel free to reach out at fortheloveofchiropractic.com. Before making changes to your practice, be sure to seek legal advice regarding those changes and regulations in your state. For the Love of Chiropractic is an RGF production, all rights reserved. And thanks for listening. Original music provided by Hunter Rich Music.